Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Author's Box. Today, I am joined by Dave Walker. Dave is the writer of the Steeltown Chronicles. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, hello, I'm Dave Walker. I'm a writer from Hamilton, Ontario. And as Nick said, I'm the author of the Steeltown Chronicles, for better or for worse.
I will say it's for better because I read Making Stephen Famous, and we're going to get to that in a second. But let me just say, what an excellent book. I thought it was fantastic. Now, I will say this is a fantasy podcast at its heart, and we do a lot of interviews with non-fantasy writers, yourself included.
Right.
But I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody.
Sure.
Nobody can escape this one. What is your favorite magic system? Now, that can be from books, TV, games, etc. And just to clarify, a magic system is how people use magic or supernatural ability, like the Force in Star Wars, I would classify as a magic system.
Right. Well, my favorite magic system is Haagen-Dazs Swiss vanilla ice cream. Okay, to be honest, it really is, because I don't read fantasy. I write some supernatural horror, which is going to come out next year. I kind of got back to that, but I wouldn't say I felt disappointing saying this, but I don't have a favorite magic system. What I find magical is creating a story that surprises me, that comes from deep within me. I also find magic in music. I'm a guitar instructor. I play guitar. I love music. So those two areas I find a lot of magic. And in nature, I find magic in nature. Yeah. But I'm sorry, I'm not a fantasy reader. My wife probably is, but
that's totally okay. I will admit, I am surprised that as of yet I hadn't gotten an answer like, oh, I don't read fantasy.
Right.
But I'm glad I did, because it is an excellent answer you've given. The magic in nature, the magic in writing. That's kind of what we're trying to showcase here, is the magic in writing. So I'm glad you've said that. Let's talk about you for a second, though, Dave. Let's talk about you specifically. If I'm not mistaken, Steeltown Chronicles has 3 or 4 books.
4 books.
4 books.
Yeah.
How long have you been writing? If you have the 4 books published, I'm assuming that goes a little ways back, but how long? Can you put a timeline on how long you've been writing?
Oh, I'm afraid I can. I'm 64 years of age, and I started writing. I was a late bloomer. I started writing at age 25. I wasn't one of these guys like 12 or 13 who had written, short stories in their tree house and all that kind of thing. And that wasn't me at all. I was a rock and roller. So I've been writing since I was 25. I took 2 or 3 years off when I burned out, actually, after Making Stephen Famous. That was the one big exciting book of my entire writing career, because I'd sent it to the William Morris agency in the UK, and they thought it was super unique. They thought it was great, and they wanted the rest. I sent them the first 50 pages. They go, here's the next 50 pages. And my wife and I are freaking out. Oh my God, they want to read the whole thing. Like, we're getting really worked up. And they thought it was great, unique, but they said, their UK audience was rather cynical, and they weren't interested in me talking about Tim Hortons or Canadian Tire. And I thought, well, damn it, I guess I won't read any more Ian Rankin books, because, they talk about things that aren't, from the UK. So it was after that, I really burned out. I tried for so long, and I just went, screw it, I'm done. But, eventually it came back. But anyway.
I think I was going to say, I love the Canadian aspects of Making Stephen Famous. It made me feel very connected to the story, as you and I are both Canadian, and it's like, oh, Tim Hortons, Canadian Tire.
I appreciate that. Good.
Oh, thank you very much. I will say, you said you were a rock and roller and you started writing at 25. Was the time frame. Was there a moment that pushed you into writing then? Like, what made you make that step?
It's a funny little step. I didn't see it coming. So I studied English at university. I only did a 3-year program. I was restless. I didn't want to be a teacher. I just wasn't for me. So I remember I had to take a couple of courses to finish in August. And by October, I joined a band and was traveling around Central and Eastern Canada. And about 10 months, I did it for 13 months. About 10 months into it, I realized it really wasn't for me, this touring. And the singer had, wasn't putting the effort out, and probably because the singer was burned out herself and was having some bad nights. I was just a bassist. I felt like a dime a dozen. So around that time, I started reading this guy called Kurt Vonnegut, of all people, and Breakfast of Champions. And I thought, this guy is cool. This is so unique. What is this stuff? And then I started reading early Stephen King, Night Shifts, and all his short stories. There's a writer from Bangor, Maine, blue collar guy. I thought there's something about stories that about him. I started thinking, I'm going to give writing a shot, which is equally as insane as trying to be a rock and roller rock star. So I went from being one crazy thing and trying another crazy thing. And I got hooked on writing though. And I really, I gave it my all. I worked in Toronto as a waiter so I could make money fast and then spend all my time writing, but I didn't really know what I was doing. Yeah. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Because sometimes I veer off.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you did. That was a great answer, actually. That was, quantifiable, which is nice because a lot of people sometimes say like, was there a specific moment? And then they just say yes. And then it's a non-quantifiable moment of like, I was just really inspired by a leaf. And you're like, that's not the, okay, fair enough. All right.
Okay.
But no, that was a great answer. I think that's very, what's the word I was looking for? Insightful into the progress into the process of this particular book, because Making Stephen Famous at its core, like it's about Donnie Love, who uses a newspaper column to tell stories about his friend who after high school just sort of dropped off the map, and they
Right.
too were also in a band. They believed they were going to make it big. They believed Steven specifically was going to make it big.
Yeah.
Was there, when you're writing this, was your own experiences sort of the inspiration for this novel? Like, was there any sort of, I don't want to say
So,
overlap because that's not quite true, but
so I'd written a bunch of stuff, some bad horror novels for years. And then one day for a long story, I kind of went, screw everything. I'm going to write from my gut. I don't care what genre it's going to fall in. So around that time, I wrote something called Art and the Machine, because I worked in a hospital at the time and I was around people with psychiatric issues. So I wrote this book called Art and the Machine, it was crazy, but it had a lot of scene, had a lot of structure, and suddenly I was starting to really get fiction. And then I met a friend, this guy I played in a band with, whose name just happens to be Steve, and I hadn't seen him in about 15 years. And I went to his place. I didn't know the guy really anymore. 15 years we hadn't talked. We drifted apart, and he had young kids, and I went to visit him. And the second thing he said to me was, "I always wanted to be famous." And even to me telling that story now, I get shivers down my spine, along my arms, because I thought I was the only fool who wanted to make it and still had a dream of making it in the music business. Not being famous, going, "Hey, look, it's Dave Walker. Hey, you're famous." I didn't care. I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to play in front of 50,000 people. I wanted to rock out and tour and make a lot of money. And that was my young man's fantasy. So for him to say that, and here is a guy who, I'm not giving anything personal away, who had a lot going on for himself financially, really done very well for himself. And for here's someone that someone on the outside would look at this guy and go, "You got it all, buddy." But he felt he didn't. Like, I couldn't fathom that. But there it was. Back in high, we might as well be back in high school, still trying to make it together. And his dream hadn't left him. But like a lot of people, we all have to. Eventually have to find a job. You have kids. But that really chilled me, and that kind of freaked me out. And I went home with the story, and that's how. So here we are now. How many years later? I was probably early 40s when I met him. All these years later, I've got 4 books out of it, and it all came from that experience. Yep.
amazing.
Yeah.
That actually, I will just say that translates very well into my next
Yeah.
question I have here. But I think a lot of people can echo that statement as well, as they want to be famous. A lot of people are definitely in that mindset.
I want to clarify that because I want people to know. I think it's a really shallow thing. I never wanted to be famous. I just didn't want, like the Beatles said, I just wanted to play in a band and not work a day job. That's really what it came down to. I didn't want to work a day job. Like I'd rather kill myself, right? It was just so depressing to me. So that was that part about I wanted to make it, but not necessarily be known by everybody.
Right.
No.
Yeah. I still think that's an excellent and very relatable point too. When we talk about this book though, we do also have to talk about what I would concept as the core theme is dealing with the past and growing up and moving on in a sense. When you're writing about these things, you said you met this guy in your 40s. When you're writing about these things and writing about middle-aged men dealing with these things. Was it hard coming up with a narrative like that? Was it tough to create, you know, something that felt so real and so relatable to so many? Did you have to do a lot of focus grouping? Was there any research that went into it? Or did you just write what felt real to you?
No focus group, because I could be, 15, 25, 30, 35. I never could have wrote these books. Never. I've lived it, right? I've been middle-aged. I've gone through the things you go through as a middle-aged man, the ups and downs and the good and the bad. And so all these things came from a real place of having experienced that, or my heart and my emotions and my gut and my conscience experienced all those things. So all the characters in my book, all four of them, are really parts of me. So I didn't find it a struggle. And the four characters in my book are actually inspired by kids I knew. They're not them, but they're inspired by kids I grew up with. So I imagine what they would be like now. So for me, yeah, there's no focus group. I lived the life. I experienced it. So I can write the old adage: write what you know. And I've written what I know. Yeah, yeah.
I think it comes off as, incredibly. I'm not middle aged. I will say that
Well, lucky you.
I'm just about 30, and yet still a lot of the things that were presented in this book, I also uh, related to it in a way where I was like, this feels very real, and I feel like you've captured that very wonderfully on the page. Is that realism in that sense? I do want to highlight something very quickly. One character in particular, and to me, it's one of the more. And I'm not going to say tragic, but in like literacy terms, it will be tragic, and that's Donnie's wife, Allison.
Oh, you'll love this answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I love this one quote, and it stuck with me. Since finishing the book, it's I believe they're in the car and they're talking about the ups and downs of their marriage, and Allison says, "You haven't married me yet." Where did that come from? Where did that, such a powerful statement?
Yeah, it came from a place of pain. So I pulled that out of an old hat, which I wish I couldn't find the hat, and it didn't exist, but it hung in my brain. So without getting too personal, when I got married, I was still hung up in an old relationship. I hadn't let go. I couldn't let go. And my wife knew that, and she said that to me. And recently I told her about your questions and she says, "I don't remember saying that." She goes, "That was brilliant." I said, "Yeah, it was, but I said, I always feel ashamed and embarrassed about that. But it was a great line for the book. And it came out like for the perfect timing in my life. It came out later for something positive. Right. So, and it is a great line, but it came from a real place again. Right. Like, I guess the tragedy is my wife is still with me.
I don't know if I call that a tragedy. No, I like I said,
we both laughed.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that line is so meaningful in so many ways, and I think in the humor of the rest of the book, where it's Donnie trying to do things and the lies that are made up about Stephen, that moment of hurt and vulnerability from Allison is so wonderfully interwoven into the narrative. I thought it was just amazing.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
We got to talk about, however, we do have to talk about the lies of Stephen. Yeah, there's so many, and one of the most interesting aspects to me is how everybody who the lies are about seem to believe them in some respect, including Pam Anderson, the leader from one of the Middle Eastern countries,
yes,
the president, even the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service.
Yeah.
When you were coming up with these, did you just look at like tabloid headlines, or you're like, this will be funny, and you just type in stuff in? Where did they come from?
Well, if I'd written, it depends what I could have written that book in any decade, I suppose, because it's kind of a timeless piece. At the time, my wife, she's not a total collaborator, but I bounce stuff off her all the time because, in fiction, you can feel really insecure about going down the wrong path and then wasting, 6 months of your time. So I bounce things. And one of the things we kind of came up with was the idea of this Stephen as a mythological hero, because Donnie creates a mythology in his mind about something used in the past and makes it so much more real than it is, that we started thinking about like Steve McQueen from The Great Escape or Clint Eastwood movies, right? And then at the time, as we thought of these things, you look back at the political climate, and I'm no expert, but Kazakhstan comes to mind, and Osama bin Laden. So we just kind of went with it from there and cooked it up. We cooked up our own fictional lies to make the lies seem real, so that Donnie's lies would seem real to other people too, and then that we can have a book out of that, Yeah. So, yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off there if you
No,
were going to
go
continue.
ahead.
So I will just say is that they made me laugh every time they came up, which to me I was like, this is pretty great.
Good.
I do want to take a second here though to talk about your wife, because I know your wife because she reached out to me and then put us in touch for this interview. And at the end of the book, you credit her as your writer wife.
Yeah.
And what, I don't know how I put this. When creating, because she's also an author, do the two of you rely on each other a lot for like beta reading and editing? What is there some clear benefits to having someone who's always not always available, but always supportive and always willing to read what you both put on the page? What can you? Is there anything you can speak to about that kind of partnership that you two have created?
I sure can. So I'm a very lucky guy. My wife's great. And I'm serious when I say these books would never be published, self-published, but they never would make it. My wife's very smart. She's a lot smarter than me, thank God. So she edits my books. So I go through them 6 or 7 times. I do it the best I can with all my 30, 40 years of experience. And of course, what comes out but the red pen? And she does a number on them. And so I don't embarrass myself by trying to publish something that I shouldn't publish. And then, then I'll take it and then I'll fix it and then I'll read it and then I'll put it down and read it 10 more times. And then eventually we'll publish that book. Now she edits her own stuff. Who can do that? I'm sorry. Only the genius woman I married can do it, because if I had to do that to save our family, they would have died a long time ago, right? Everyone's dead, right? So not happening. So then she said, Dave, can you look at my book? Sure. And after I read the book, I find 5 mistakes. Yeah, you forgot a period. Or you know what? You forgot to capitalize that first word. Stuff that's like, now she picked up writing 4 or 5 years ago. She wasn't in a barracks somewhere eating like popcorn, trying to survive on $10 a month, writing the book. She's like, who does that, man? So my wife's got a gift. She's just a very smart person and a very, very nice person. But what we do read each other and we support, because sometimes she'll suggest something to me or she'll talk with her book and I'll say, I like the idea. Like, oh, well, what about this? So it's very helpful. And on that note, I would say to anyone who wants to self-publish, for the love of God, unless you're my wife, you got to find someone smarter and fork out a few bucks. Like, I'm just lucky. I married Anne, who just happens to be really good at this. And she just is. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this interview. You wouldn't even have heard of me ever. You wouldn't have, So you got to find someone and give them $500. Make sure they're smart, man, and then get them to do it. Because what I've learned from my wife is that for about 30, 40, 35 odd years, I realized I was making the same mistakes I could never see over and over, thinking this is good. No, it's not. It sucks. It's terrible. But I will say that fiction for me has the 500 things you did wrong 35 years ago. You're doing maybe 50 of those things wrong now. So it's all about, it's about not doing the wrong thing anymore. And then suddenly your fiction comes more alive and it kind of grows out of that. But boy, for me, I'm a slow learner, or I'm just I'm not a quitter. I hate quitting things. So I keep going at it. And so if I wasn't married to my wife, I'd say find someone really smart, and go from there. Luckily, I haven't had to fork out any dough. I think once I bought my wife some flowers and made her dinner. So no, it's be better than that. I hope she's gonna watch this and she'll laugh. I hope she'll laugh.
I think it's it's such a asset to have someone in your corner who you can rely on, and people don't talk about this enough, who is willing to not lie to save feelings, especially during the editing process.
Right. And a few times my wife says, "Oh, she would say, well, I get really militant. I say, please, that's the worst thing you can do for me is to say it was okay. And then a year later go, well, I said, don't ever do that. Cut right to it and tear it apart. And
Mhm.
she does. She does. And it's painful. But it's like, oh, I've learned nothing. But I think I learned a few things.
I will say, I mean, if the end result is a book like Making Stephen Famous, that it was the right decision and it worked out very well. I do just have, so the book itself is set in Hamilton.
Yeah.
Um, and I've been to Hamilton many, many times. It's a city I pass constantly because I'm always going to Aldershot Go Station to go see the Jays. So I'm constantly
Oh,
driving
yeah.
past the Hamilton Spectator. Um, I had to ask myself though, when you're writing a book like this, when you're writing something with this sort of scope, why not choose a city like Toronto or even like a smaller one? Why Hamilton?
Well, I don't know where I read it somewhere, but I believe it. I grew up in Hamilton. I lived here for 23 years. So all my childhood memories, it's all genetically imprinted in me. And I think that you know, I would say as a younger man, my tendency might be, gee, if I want to sell this book, I should put it in a big city like Toronto. And I lived there for 18 years, by the way, but it was never home for me. It never felt right for me. Hamilton's always felt right for me. And I think the truest fiction that's deep down inside you, for me, I can't speak for other people. It comes from stuff that you know so well that it'll never come across as contrived or a little phony or like I'm trying to appeal to some kind of genre or some kind of publishing company or blah 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 blah. I
Hmm.
don't. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. So, and I love writing about things I know, and because I know this territory. In fact, if you ever do read my other books, just up the road there's an intersection called Upper Ottawa and Fennel, and I call that the Village. And all my stories revolve around the Village because I know that area. Yeah, that's so it's
Upper
fun. It's
Ottawa.
fun for me, right?
Yeah. What is at that corner? What's at that intersection?
Oh, there's well, you probably Mike's Submarine. Some of the things I probably mentioned and Making Stephen Famous. There's a bowling alley. Used to be called Sherwood Lanes. It's all falling apart now. There's oh, what else is there? Oh, there's a pot shop there now. There's a bar. There's like a gaming place. There's like a card
Yeah.
shop there. You probably think maybe because you're a fantasy guy, maybe is a the guy
Yeah.
running the card shop there. It's that
Yeah.
it's yeah. That's it. That's where we're at
Yeah.
now.
Okay. I was there. I want to say maybe 4 months ago. I was in
Oh,
that area. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, because my partner, she's a classical musician, and her pianist lives in Hamilton. So we were there so she could rehearse for something, and I was just dicking around.
well, hold on now. First, two things. Welcome to the Village. Second, it's such a hilarious thing because it's anything but a village. It's a bit of a dump, right? But I call it a village, ironically. My wife was a classical singer and she studied classical music at U of T. So I'm seeing some parallels here a little bit.
Yeah, she went to Brock for her undergrad, and then Western for her master's, and I believe her pianist is a professor at Brock, something in that vein.
Great.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, my
Small
wife
world.
ended, my wife ended up teaching music down at Glendale High School here. So she was a high school teacher as well. And yeah.
Amazing.
So yeah, yeah.
Huh. Okay, look at that.
Well,
Um,
okay, I'll ask you at the end of this thing. Go ahead with
I,
anything else
I
you want
was
to
just
say.
I was just gonna ask, like, when you're writing a story in a town like Hamilton, and it's something that you are so familiar with it because you live there and because you have lived there. When you're writing about a Hamilton, do you have to like leave out names of certain businesses? Is there like a legality issue when it comes to that, or is it just like here we are? I'm going to write the real Hamilton. This is the real Hamilton.
So I've worried about that. And I think I've read other books where they reference things like Walmart, or you think, okay. So my thing now is I'll come up with a different name because I don't want a problem there. And anything in me I've written in the past, I would say I would have made sure that I wasn't maligning the business. Or saying
Mhm.
they did this, the people at Walmart did something horrible. So it was just part of the location. rather so that someone say, hey, you maligned our business, you said something untruthful about it. But so I referenced Mike's Submarines, which is still there, but nothing bad happens at Mike's Submarines. It's just a reference point. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was there when I was a kid. So well, all those years ago. Yeah.
Well, I asked. Funny enough, I had an interview with someone yesterday who's from Montreal, and I asked her the same question, and she was just like, "Oh, I just change all the names." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how the difference there, because you're right. If you don't malign them, what are they going to say? Oh, he put me in our book.
Yeah. Well,
Free
there's
advertisement.
I got 3 more books coming out in the next couple of years. They're, anyway. And I make up the names now just to be safe. Sometimes you get so burnt out writing a book. You're like, if I have to look and change one more thing, I just can't stop. I can't handle it. It's like I can't take it. So it's
Mhm.
like let's get it out the door. You get to that point. But now, yeah, 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 I do.
Amazing. Um, that's all the structured questions I have about the book for you. I do have two more questions for you, though. These are two questions I ask everybody. You kind of answered the one a little bit, but we'll
Yeah.
revisit it. My first is, as Canadians, and as I'm sure, if your wife's a high school teacher, she knows this. Literacy rates
Mhm.
in Canada and North America as a whole are in what I would call crisis.
Mhm.
Um, so let's say you're standing in front of a high school classroom, high school English classroom, or even a university, elementary, whichever, and you're asked to give one of the students asks you to give one good reason as to why they should spend more time reading and writing. What would you say?
Well, there's about 20 different answers, so I'll just shoot one out that came to mind. I think that when you read and write, you learn about yourself and how unique you are. Everyone's unique in their own way, but you'll never discover that if you don't read and write, because you'll never be forced to look inside yourself. And when you can do that, you will start to discover things about yourself that make you unique and will give you some power. And I think teenagers are looking for power. They're looking to stand out. Who am I? What's going on? Should I be like everybody else and do my hair a certain way or wear the certain jeans? But this is the way in. That's the way in. So if you want to be unique and understand yourself in a deeper level, then you should read and write. And who doesn't want to be unique, right? That's probably kind of a lame answer, but that's got to. There's a bunch of other ones I had too, but you know,
I was just about to say, I love answers like that, because those are the answers that students are going to latch onto more
right?
than, say, like, every answer I've gotten so far is a great answer.
Yeah,
But there are answers that are great for us as adults, and then there's
yeah,
answers that are great for the students. That is a
right.
great answer for the students.
Oh,
They would
good.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Um, my last question for you here, in the structured category, that is, you know, advice, not for myself, but for a different author, like an author who's coming up and they want to get where you are. What advice would you give them to either self-publish, traditional publish, whatever? What would you tell them if they asked you for any sort of wisdom on your end?
If they're a genre writer and they've been reading like fantasy and they've read like 10,000 books since they were 3 years old, it's probably a good place for you to start. Send your stuff around to the actual, legit publishers and see if you have any luck. Feel the pain of rejection. You might get the odd letter that someone says, you know what, you got what it takes. I had a few of those. You got what it takes. Keep writing. But try that first because I think you can learn from that. And then if you get fed up, keep writing and find a way to publish your own stuff. And there's different ways to do that. But there's no easy road. My road is not your road. My road is my own road. I learned everything the hard way and with a lot of help along the way. And when you realize that you don't care about being published traditionally, or, and you can tell all your friends, wow, I got published by so-and-so. And you just need and have a deep desire to express yourself through story, then that eventually becomes enough. So if you're self-published and not many people buy your book, it doesn't matter because you got another one coming and they're never going to stop coming because A, I can't help myself. And B, I have so many stories, I'm not going to live long enough to tell them all. But don't quit because don't let the business get you down, man, because you're wasting your life. And if I could go back and tell myself, I wouldn't have listened to myself, but that's what I would tell myself now is don't take this so seriously, because my God, did I take it seriously. And my friends were moving on with big careers, and I was living in a crap hole with hardly any, trying to be a writer, which was suicide. Like, it's suicide. Being a full-time fiction writer is suicide, right? It's very, 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 very difficult. But so enjoy what you're doing. Write from your gut. Don't write from, I want to write like this guy. We all start that way, but write your own story and then see where it fits. I can tell you right now, my novels don't really fit in a very good genre. What, humor? Who cares about humor? I'd probably better luck if it was a fantasy or a horror. People like humor, but it's hard. I've really had a difficult time putting myself, but do I care? No, because I got I have 3 books, and the 2 after that, I've gone back to supernatural thrillers. Did I plan that? No, sirree, bud. They just came out of me. Well, there they are. I'm not going to deny them, but I feel kind of, it's going to be fun because now I have an actual genre that's very popular that I can categorize my books. Whereas the other 4 was tough. It was tough. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I really like, I'm a big humor guy. I do like humor, which is unfortunate that's not as popular as it used to be as a genre, because I think it doesn't get the respect it deserves, quite frankly. Okay, that's all the structured questions. We now have time for our 10 rapid fire questions.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna fire them off. You're just gonna answer either or. You don't have to give a reason. Both is an acceptable answer. I keep getting people who are like, "Oh, I could go either way." Both is also an acceptable answer.
Okay.
Let me just pull them up here. I have them. Yes. Right. Where are we at? There we are. Okay. All right. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Pen and paper or computers to write?
Computers.
Microsoft Word or Google Doc?
Microsoft Word.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Tim Hortons or Starbucks?
Tim Hortons.
Hair bands or glam bands?
Hair bands, I guess.
Hair bands, fair enough. Movies or TV?
Movies.
Movies. Hiking or kayaking?
I like both, but I'll say hiking.
Hiking. Zeppelin or The Who?
Oh, you're killing me here. I love them both. Well, I'll say Zeppelin because I was into Zeppelin before The Who. So Zeppelin, yeah.
Fair enough. Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton?
Both great. I'll go with Page because he was one of my first idols.
Fair enough. Edit as you go or when you're done?
Mostly when I'm done.
And my final question for you here is long novels or short novels?
Short novels.
Okay, well, that was 10 rapid fire questions. Dave, thank you so much for being here. If you're listening to this, dear listener, you absolutely must check out the Steeltown Chronicles, especially if you're from Hamilton or the surrounding area. Dave, do you want to promote anything while we're finishing up here?
No. Yeah. Well, just if you want to read my books, oftentimes the first ones are free. Check out Indigo. If you want to buy the paperback, Indigo in Canada is your best bet. Also, you can go to Smashwords or D2D, and you can get either physical copies or ebook versions. And if you read the first book and don't laugh, I was going to say I'll give you $50, but I probably won't. So, but I think you will laugh if you read my first book, and you'll see parts of yourself in my story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I will second that. If you don't laugh at Making Stephen Famous, quite frankly, there might be something wrong with you because it is a funny book. But
what Nick said.
Yeah. But again, thank you so much for joining me, Dave. And dear listener, I will see you next time. Okay. Stay magical, my friends.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Nick.